He had not slept for more than 2 hours at a time in weeks. The dark circles under his eyes were proof of that. Still, he stood in the long airport line with his baby girl pressed gently against his chest in a soft carrier. She was only 4 months old, small and warm. Her tiny fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt as if she was afraid he might disappear. The airport felt louder than usual that night. Rolling suitcases bumped against each other. People rushed past with coffee cups and headphones. Announcements echoed from the ceiling. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. He felt like the only one who didn't. This was his first flight alone with her. He adjusted the diaper bag on his shoulder and checked his boarding pass again, even though he had already looked at it 5 times. His hands were slightly shaking, not because he feared flying, but because he feared failing to calm her, failing to be enough for her, failing to handle everything without the person who used to stand beside him. Just 3 months earlier, he had never imagined he would be doing this alone. Life had changed too fast. One moment he was part of a team, learning how to be a parent together. The next, he was standing in hospital hallways signing papers he never wanted to sign. Now, he was heading to another state to be closer to family, hoping the move would give them both a fresh start. The baby stirred against him. A small whimper escaped her lips. He froze. "It's okay," he whispered softly, rocking side to side. He had learned that gentle movement sometimes helped. He had learned many things in a short time. How to warm bottles at 3 in the morning. How to change diapers in near darkness. How to stay strong in front of others and fall apart only when she was asleep. The line moved forward. When it was finally his turn, the airline worker gave him a polite smile. "Traveling alone?" she asked, glancing at the baby. He nodded. "Yes, just us." She typed something into her computer and handed him the boarding pass. "You're in the middle seat, but I'll see if we can move you if there's space." Middle seat. His stomach tightened. He had hoped for a window, somewhere he could turn slightly away if she cried, somewhere he wouldn't feel every pair of eyes on him. He thanked her anyway and walked toward security. Getting through security with a baby felt like solving a puzzle under pressure. He had to take off his shoes, fold the stroller, remove bottles from the bag, hold the baby while his belongings passed through the scanner. She began to fuss again, louder this time. A few people in line looked over. He tried to ignore the stares. Babies cry, he reminded himself. That's what they do. Still, his chest felt tight. He bounced her gently, whispering soft words he hoped sounded confident. "We've got this. It's just a little trip." After what felt like an hour, they made it through. He found a quiet corner near the gate and sat down. He checked the time. 30 minutes until boarding. He took out a bottle and tested it carefully. Not too hot, not too cold. He fed her slowly, watching her small face relax as she drank. In moments like this, the world seemed to pause. The noise faded. The fear faded. It was just the two of them. She finished and looked up at him with wide eyes. For a second, she almost smiled. His throat tightened. She had her mother's eyes. Every time he noticed it, it felt like both a gift and a wound. Boarding was announced. He stood up, lifted the diaper bag, folded the stroller again, and joined the line. Families with small children were allowed to board early. That small kindness made him feel seen, even if only a little. When he stepped onto the plane, a wave of warm air hit him. The narrow aisle already felt crowded. He counted the rows until he found his seat. Middle seat. A man was sitting by the window, already wearing headphones. A woman sat on the aisle, scrolling through her phone. They both looked up briefly as he approached. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm right here." They stood to let him in. He settled carefully into the seat, trying not to bump anyone. The baby began to squirm. "Please, not now," he thought. He fastened his seatbelt and adjusted her position. Around him, passengers lifted bags into overhead bins. The sound of compartments slamming shut echoed through the cabin. Then it started. At first, it was just a small cry, a warning sound. He quickly reached for her pacifier and gently placed it in her mouth. For a moment, she sucked quietly. Then she pulled it out and cried louder. Heads turned. He felt heat rush to his face. "Sure, it's okay," he whispered again, rocking as much as the tight seat allowed. The crying grew sharper. The woman on the aisle shifted slightly. The man by the window raised his eyebrows before looking back at his phone. He tried everything he could think of. He checked her diaper. Still clean. He offered the bottle again. She pushed it away. He patted her back gently. Nothing worked. As the plane began to move toward the runway, her cries filled the small space around them. The sound seemed louder inside the cabin than it had in the airport. He could almost feel the thoughts around him. Why would someone travel alone with a baby? Can he calm her down? This is going to be a long flight. He swallowed hard. He wanted to explain. He wanted to tell them that he hadn't planned this, that he wouldn't be on this flight if life had gone differently, that he was trying his best with hands that still felt unfamiliar in this new role. The plane picked up speed. As it lifted into the air, the pressure changed. Her cries became louder, almost desperate. He remembered reading that baby's ears hurt during takeoff. He tried to get her to drink again so she would swallow, hoping it would help. She refused. A tear slid down her cheek. His heart cracked a little more. "I know," he murmured, his voice shaking now. "I know, sweetheart. I'm trying." The engines roared beneath them. The seatbelt sign remained on. He couldn't stand up. He couldn't walk the aisle. He felt trapped, pinned between two strangers in a wave of rising panic. He bounced his knee gently. He hummed a soft tune he used to hear at home. His voice was quiet, but steady. The crying didn't stop. A sigh came from somewhere behind him, another from across the aisle. Each sound felt like a reminder that he was failing in public. He closed his eyes for a brief second, fighting back his own tears. He had promised himself he would stay strong for her. She needed him calm. She needed him steady. He opened his eyes and looked down at her tiny face, red and tense from crying. "It's just us," he whispered, "and that's enough." But even as he said it, doubt crept in. Was he enough? The plane continued climbing higher into the night sky. The city lights below grew smaller, then disappeared into darkness. Inside the cabin, the baby's cries echoed again louder than before, and the flight had only just begun. The crying did not slow down after takeoff. If anything, it became more intense. Her tiny face was red now, her little hands clenched tight, as if she was fighting something only she could feel. He held her closer, careful not to press too hard, afraid of doing something wrong. People around him were fully awake now. A woman a few rows ahead turned around and stared. A man across the aisle shook his head slightly. Someone behind him whispered something he couldn't quite hear, but the tone was clear enough. It wasn't kind. He felt his shoulders tense. His back ached from sitting stiffly, trying not to disturb anyone more than he already had. Every cry felt louder than the last, like it was bouncing off the walls of the plane and landing right back on him. He focused on her instead of them. He gently rubbed her back in slow circles, the way he had learned during long nights at home. Sometimes it worked. Tonight, it didn't. "It's okay," he whispered again, though his voice was starting to crack. "I'm right here." The woman on the aisle glanced at him, then at the baby. She didn't say anything, but she shifted her legs away slightly, creating more space. It was a small gesture, but he noticed it. He silently thanked her. The seatbelt sign was still on. He couldn't stand. He couldn't walk her up and down the aisle. All he could do was sit and endure, just like everyone else, only with far more eyes on him. Minutes felt like hours. He tried the pacifier again. She spat it out. He tried holding her upright against his chest. She screamed. He tried lowering his voice, then raising it slightly, singing the same soft tune again and again. Nothing reached her. His thoughts drifted, whether he wanted them to or not. He remembered another flight, years ago. Back then, he wasn't holding a crying baby. He was holding a warm hand. They had laughed during turbulence and shared snacks, complaining about legroom and bad movies. He remembered how safe everything felt then, how simple. Now, every bump of the plane made his heart jump. A flight attendant walked past, pushing a cart. She glanced at him, then slowed. "You doing okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded quickly, even though it wasn't true. "Yes, I think her ears hurt." "That happens sometimes," she said gently. "If you need anything, let me know." He wanted to ask for help. He wanted to say he didn't know what he was doing. but the word stayed stuck in his throat. He had learned, these past few months, to carry things alone. The attendant moved on. The crying continued. He could feel sweat forming at his temples. His shirt stuck slightly to his back. His arms were tired, but he didn't dare shift her too much. A man 2 rows back let out a loud sigh. Another passenger muttered, "Unbelievable." The word hit him harder than he expected. Unbelievable. As if he had chosen this. As if he wasn't already pushing himself past exhaustion. His jaw tightened. He stared straight ahead, refusing to turn around. If he met their eyes, he wasn't sure he could keep it together. He adjusted the blanket around her, careful to keep her face uncovered. Her cries came out uneven now, almost hoarse. That worried him more than the noise. He leaned his forehead down until it almost touched hers. "Please," he whispered, not sure if he was talking to her or to himself. "Please calm down." She didn't. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane leveled out. The engine settled into a steady hum. Most passengers tried to return to what they were doing, but the sound of her crying made it impossible to fully ignore. A few people put in earbuds. Someone pulled a jacket over their head. He felt very small. He wondered if everyone on the plane saw him as a problem instead of a person, a disturbance instead of a tired father trying to get through one night. He shifted carefully and looked down at her face again. Her eyes were squeezed shut now. Her breathing sounded strained between cries. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. Something felt wrong. His heart rate picked up. He checked her chest, watching it rise and fall. He listened closely, blocking out everything else. The cries were still there, but they sounded thinner somehow. Fear crept in. He pressed the call button above his seat. A different flight attendant appeared a moment later. "Yes, I think something might be wrong," he said quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. "She won't calm down, and her breathing sounds strange." The attendant leaned in slightly, her expression serious now. She watched the baby for a few seconds. "She's probably just uncomfortable," she said, but her tone had changed. "Let me get some water and see if we can help." She walked away. The seconds stretched. The baby's cry began to weaken, turning into short, uneven sounds. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Too suddenly. The silence hit him like a wall. He froze. The cabin felt unnaturally quiet now, as if everyone sensed a shift. Conversations stopped. Movements paused. Even the constant rustle of bags and wrappers seemed to fade. He looked down at her face. Her mouth was open slightly, but no sound came out. "Hey," he whispered, panic rising fast. "Hey, I'm here." He gently touched her cheek. It felt warm. Too warm. "She's not crying," the woman on the aisle said softly, her phone forgotten in her hand. "I know," he replied, his voice barely audible. His hands trembled as he adjusted her position, trying to get her to respond. He spoke her nickname, the one only he used during quiet moments at home. Nothing. A wave of fear rushed through him, stronger than anything he had felt before. "Help," he said louder now. Heads turned. Eyes widened. The flight attendant hurried back, followed by another. Someone a few seats away stood up. "I'm a nurse," a woman said quickly, already moving closer. "May I see her?" He nodded without thinking, carefully handing his baby over, his arms suddenly feeling empty and useless. The nurse checked her quickly, her face calm but focused. "We need oxygen," she said. The word echoed in his head. Oxygen. Around them, the cabin remained completely silent. No sighs, no whispers, no complaints. Just fear, hanging heavy in the air as everyone watched and waited. Time seemed to slow down the moment the nurse took the baby from his arms. His hands stayed frozen in the air for a second, shaped like they were still holding her. Then they dropped into his lap, empty and shaking. The nurse supported the baby's head and gently tilted her slightly to the side. Her movements were calm, practiced, the kind that came from years of training and instinct. That calm was the only thing keeping him from falling apart completely. One of the flight attendants rushed back with a small oxygen mask and knelt in the aisle. Another spoke quickly into the phone near the front of the cabin. He could hear only parts of the words, but he understood enough. Medical situation. Infant. He leaned forward, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. Every sound around him felt far away, like he was underwater. The hum of the engines, the faint rattle of the plane, the breathing of the passengers, all of it faded behind the sound of his own pulse. "I'm right here," he said, even though the baby was no longer in his arms. His voice shook, but he didn't stop talking. He had learned that silence made fear louder. The nurse placed the oxygen mask gently over the baby's face. The baby's chest moved weakly at first, then a little stronger. The nurse watched closely, counting breaths under her own breath. "Come on," the nurse whispered. "That's it." He held his breath. The baby let out a soft sound, not a cry, but something close to it, a tiny protest. A sharp wave of relief hit him, so fast his vision blurred. He didn't realize he had been holding his breath until he gasped for air. "That's good," the nurse said quietly. "That's a good sign." Tears spilled over before he could stop them. He wiped his face quickly with his sleeve, embarrassed even now, but no one seemed to care. No one was watching him with annoyance anymore. They were watching her. The cabin was completely silent. People leaned into the aisle. Phones were lowered. Even the children on the plane were quiet, sensing something serious was happening. A flight attendant crouched beside him. "Sir, we're notifying the pilot. We may need to adjust our flight path, but right now she's responding well." He nodded, though his mind struggled to keep up. Adjust flight path. Responding well. Words floated past him without fully landing. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked. The attendant didn't make promises. "She's breathing better now. That's what matters most." The nurse adjusted the baby's position slightly, supporting her back and neck. The baby's eyes fluttered open for a brief second, unfocused, then closed again. "There you are," the nurse said softly. "Stay with us." He leaned forward again, his knees pressed against the seat in front of him. He wanted to touch her, but he was afraid of getting in the way. "I should have done something sooner," he said, the words spilling out. "I thought it was just her ears. I didn't want to bother anyone." The nurse looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were kind but firm. "You did the right thing. You asked for help. That's what matters." Her words settled somewhere deep inside him. A man from a few rows back spoke up quietly. "Do you need anything? I have some medical training too." Another voice followed. "I've got water." A woman nearby offered a clean cloth. The same people who had sighed and complained earlier were now leaning forward, ready to help in any way they could. It surprised him how quickly fear could change people. The nurse kept monitoring the baby's breathing. The oxygen mask fogged slightly with each breath. The baby's chest rose and fell in a steadier rhythm now. "That's better," the nurse said again. The flight attendant returned and spoke quietly to the nurse. "Pilot says we're staying on course now, but medical support will be waiting when we land." He felt another wave of emotion, this one heavy and strange. Relief mixed with guilt, gratitude mixed with fear. He nodded again, unable to speak. The nurse slowly removed the oxygen mask, watching carefully. The baby shifted slightly and let out a small, tired sound. Not a cry, more like a sigh. A few passengers let out breaths they had been holding. "She's stable for the moment," the nurse said. "Let's keep her upright and close." She gently handed the baby back to him. The moment her weight returned to his arms, he broke. He held her against his chest, one hand supporting her head, the other resting on her back, his face pressed into her soft hair. His shoulders shook as quiet sobs escaped him. "I've got you," he whispered over and over. "I've got you." No one judged him this time. The woman on the aisle reached over and rested a hand lightly on his arm. "You're doing great," she said softly. He nodded, unable to look up. The baby remained quiet, her breathing slow and steady now. Her tiny body felt warm and real against him. Each breath she took felt like a gift. The plane continued forward through the dark sky, but the tension in the cabin slowly eased. People sat back in their seats, though many still watched them from time to time, not with annoyance but concern. A flight attendant checked in again a few minutes later. "How is she?" "Better," he said quietly. She smiled. "We'll keep an eye on you both." As the minutes passed, the baby shifted again and settled deeper against him. Her fingers curled into his shirt, just like they had in the airport. He focused on that feeling, on the warmth, on the simple fact that she was here. His thoughts drifted to all the moments he had been afraid since becoming a single parent. The nights he lay awake, listening to her breathe. The constant fear of making a mistake. The pressure of being everything for someone so small. He had thought asking for help meant weakness. Tonight had proven him wrong. The nurse returned to her seat, but kept glancing back now and then. Each time, she gave him a small nod. The cabin lights dimmed further. The steady hum of the plane returned to the background of his awareness. He rocked the baby gently, careful not to wake her. His breathing finally began to slow, matching hers. Around them, the flight went on. But for him, the world had narrowed to one quiet moment at 30,000 feet, holding the most important thing he would ever know, realizing just how close he had come to losing it, and how many strangers had stepped in to help him hold on. The baby slept quietly against his chest, her breathing soft, and even now, he barely moved, afraid that even the smallest shift might disturb her. His arms were tired, his back sore, but he didn't care. As long as she was calm, he would stay exactly like this. The cabin felt different after what had happened. The tension that once filled the air had faded, replaced by something gentler. People spoke in low voices now. Some glanced over at him and the baby, then quickly looked away, almost as if they didn't want to intrude on the moment. A flight attendant came by again and crouched slightly beside him. "She's still doing okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, she's sleeping." "That's good," she said with a soft smile. "If you need anything at all, please let us know." He thanked her quietly. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Each one felt like a small victory. The woman on the aisle shifted and pulled a small blanket from her bag. She unfolded it carefully and handed it to him. "In case she gets cold," she said. "Thank you," he replied, surprised by the kindness. He draped the blanket gently over the baby, careful not to cover her face. She didn't stir. Across the aisle, a man leaned over and whispered, "You handle that well." He didn't know how to respond. He just nodded, his throat tight. He thought back to the way people had looked at him earlier. The frustration, the judgment. Now those looks were gone. In their place was understanding, maybe even respect. He realized how quickly people could change when they saw fear instead of noise. The nurse stood up briefly from her seat and walked back to check on them again. She watched the baby's chest rise and fall, then smiled. "She's breathing nice and steady," she said. "You're doing a good job keeping her upright." "Thank you," he said. The words felt small compared to what she had done. She gave him a reassuring nod and returned to her seat. The plane continued through the night. Outside the window, there was nothing but darkness and the occasional blink of distant lights. Inside, the soft hum of the engines became almost calming. His thoughts wandered, now that his fear had eased enough to let them. He thought about how alone he had felt these past months. How every decision felt heavy because there was no one else to share it with. How he questioned himself every day. Tonight had tested him in a way he hadn't expected. He had felt judged, embarrassed, and afraid. But he had also felt support. He had seen strangers step forward without hesitation. He had learned that asking for help didn't make him weak. The baby shifted slightly and made a small sound in her sleep. His heart jumped, but she settled again, her fingers still curled into his shirt. He let out a slow breath. The woman on the aisle spoke again, her voice gentle. "Is this your first time flying with her?" "Yes," he said. "That's brave," she replied. "I remember how scary it felt with my first." He gave a faint smile. "I didn't feel brave." She smiled back. Most people don't when they actually are. They sat in comfortable silence after that. A flight attendant announced that they were more than halfway to their destination. Medical staff would be ready when they landed, just to be safe. The announcement brought back a flicker of worry, but it didn't take over this time. He trusted that she was okay. He trusted the people around him. As the flight went on, the cabin lights dimmed further. Some passengers slept. Others watched movies with the sound low. He stayed awake, watching her. He thought about the future waiting for them. A small apartment near family. Help when he needed it. Maybe even moments where he could breathe again. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more nights like this. More moments of doubt. More times when he would feel out of place and overwhelmed. But there would also be moments like this one. Quiet, still, full of meaning. A child across the aisle peeked over the seat and whispered, "Is the baby okay?" "Yes," he whispered back. "She's sleeping now." The child smiled and ducked back down. The plane began a gentle descent sometime later. The change in pressure made his heart race again, but the baby remained calm. He adjusted her slightly, keeping her upright, just as he had been shown. She stirred, opened her eyes briefly, and let out a tiny sound. Not a cry, just a reminder that she was there. "That's it," he murmured. "Easy." She closed her eyes again. A few passengers noticed and smiled quietly. When the wheels finally touched the runway, a soft cheer rippled through the cabin. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a shared release of emotion. He felt tears in his eyes again, but this time they were different. As the plane slowed and taxied, people gathered their things slowly. No one rushed. A few stopped by his row. "You did great," one woman said. "She's lucky to have you," another added. He thanked them, his voice thick. The doors opened and cool air rushed in. Medical staff waited near the gate, just as promised. A flight attendant guided him forward gently. "They'll take a quick look at her," she said. "You're almost there." He stood carefully, holding the baby close. As he stepped off the plane, he felt something shift inside him. He was still tired, still scared at times, still learning. But he wasn't alone. Not anymore. The medical team met him just a few steps outside the plane. They spoke calmly, moving with quiet confidence. One of them asked simple questions, while another checked the baby's breathing and color. He answered as best he could, his voice steady now, even though his legs felt weak. "She looks stable," one of them said after a moment. "We'll do a full check, but she's doing well." Those words felt like a weight lifting from his chest. They guided him to a small room nearby. He sat in a chair, holding her while they monitored her for a while. She slept through most of it, waking only once to look around with sleepy eyes before settling again. He watched her closely, counting each breath without realizing he was doing it. After some time, the medical staff explained what they believed had happened. A brief breathing issue made worse by pressure changes and stress. Scary, but not uncommon. They told him what signs to watch for and when to seek help. "You did the right thing," one of them said. "You acted when something felt wrong." He nodded, those words sinking in slowly. When they finally let him go, the airport was quieter. Most passengers from his flight had already left. He stood there for a moment, adjusting the diaper bag, feeling the weight of the long night settle into his bones. He stepped outside into the cool air. The night was calm. Too calm, almost after everything that had happened. He buckled the baby into the car seat provided by a waiting family member. She stirred slightly but didn't cry. Her small hand reached out and caught his finger. He smiled for the first time that night. The drive was quiet. Streetlights passed by in a steady rhythm. He rested one hand on the steering wheel and kept glancing back at her in the mirror. As they pulled into the driveway, exhaustion hit him all at once, the kind that sinks deep into the body. Still, his steps were steady as he carried her inside. The place was simple but warm. Familiar voices greeted him softly. Careful not to wake the baby. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Just being there was enough. Later, when the house was quiet again, he sat alone in the dim light of the living room. The baby slept in a small crib nearby. He watched her chest rise and fall, slow and peaceful. His thoughts drifted back to the plane. The crying, the looks, the fear that had gripped him so tightly he thought it might break him. He thought about the silence that followed, how everything had stopped, how strangers had stepped forward without knowing his story. He realized something then. He had been carrying more than just his child. He had been carrying guilt, grief, and the pressure to be perfect, to never need help, to never fail. But no one had asked him to be perfect. They had just asked him to care. He stood and walked over to the crib, resting his hand lightly on the rail. "We're going to be okay," he whispered, not sure if he was saying it to her or to himself. Days passed. The story of the flight became something people asked about in quiet moments. He told it simply. not as a dramatic event, but as a turning point. He noticed changes in himself. He asked for help more easily. He trusted his instincts more. He stopped apologizing every time his baby made noise in public. Sometimes when she cried, people still stared, but now he met their eyes calmly, not with anger, not with shame, just honesty. He learned that being a single parent didn't mean being alone. One afternoon, weeks later, he took her for a walk. The sun was warm. She slept peacefully in the stroller. A stranger smiled at her as they passed. "Beautiful baby," the woman said. "Thank you," he replied. He kept walking, feeling lighter than he had in months. That night, as he rocked her to sleep, he thought again about the moment the cabin had gone silent, about how close he had come to losing everything, about how fragile life really was. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. She sighed in her sleep, calm and safe. He understood now that fear would always be part of loving someone this deeply, but so would courage. And even at 30,000 feet, surrounded by strangers, in his weakest moment he had found both. The world hadn't ended that night. It had opened, and he was ready to step forward, one quiet breath at a time, carrying his daughter and a new kind of strength into whatever came next.